So this is Hema Lakkaraju, founder and CEO of HAG Corp. 12 years experience in health and life sciences in the industry as strategy and compliance leader. She's been creating strategies and helping products and projects release 40% faster using data-driven strategies, expertise across health, medical devices, diagnostic startups, and including large corporations and organizations as well. She's a business partnership, regulations, and compliance strategy consultant. And Hema, you are very, very welcome here. And I'm very glad that you've come to join this conversation, picking up on what we've heard so far. What I would like to do is I'm going to take myself off the screen and let Master of Ceremonies, Jaisal, start this panel off. But I would love somebody to replace me here. So who's been listening to this who thinks, I want to be in this panel right now? I want to contribute to this. I want to bring my thoughts into this. Who's going to give me a wave? Who's going to step forward? Dean's waving. Are you waving at me, Dean? Or
Yeah, totally.
All right, we can have a hot seat, Dean.
Totally,
so let's put you in the hot seat, Dean. And if you want to stay in the hot seat, great. If you want to come out of it, then we'll do that as well.
Cool. But just let me know when is the time.
But Jaisal, we have had so many views and questions coming through. I don't know how you've been monitoring it, but I know you've been trying. So over to you. I'll be here if you need me, but I'm sure you won't. To get started, and let's try and make some sense out of what we're hearing tonight. We've got plenty of time. Over to you, Jaisal.
I've been monitoring some part of it, but of course, it takes a while to pick up things, but I'll go on as on the fly as well. So I think welcome to all the panelists and welcome Hema on the panel group. We have had all the speakers in here, and welcome Dean as well on the hot seat. And I would start the conversation. Hema, I would start by asking you that what do you think, which are the personas do we think might be responsible for introduction of bias in the AI models? Because what happens is always it's the developer who gets the eye that, okay, it is the developer who introduced the bias. But where does this bias get introduced? By which personas?
Yeah, so hi everybody, really excited to be here today. And I want to take this point by viewing AI similar to an organization. So it have 3 P's: product, process, and people. Okay, so for AI to answer the bias, or even for us, now we are in the 5th industrial revolution where we have the AI and human interference. And together we are building not only just the digital healthcare ecosystem, but a smarter healthcare ecosystem. And for it to happen, we have to include the processes, product, and people concept of it. So in respect to that, the very important thing that you need to understand is it's the commitment, confidence, and collaboration. Commitment, we are not just counting on the developers, but we are also counting on the steering committee, which will have the end users, which will have clinicians, which will have the bigger stakeholders like board members, which will have the people bringing in that will represent the end user, who can be a patient, who can be a customer, who can be, and the major researchers like clinicians, and also the major stakeholders who represent the vision of the organization. And it's the commitment from all these people together to build a algorithm, to build a product, to build a service that gives a major commitment and higher level service to the patient. Why this is important is it's bringing in different diverse set of visions from different people who have one goal. And the one goal is to serve the patient or the customer better. And the developer brings their skill set in terms of the development, but they have no clue in terms of the ethics. They have no clue in terms of data collection, in terms of diverse set of data. Why it is important, when it is important, and what it is important. And bringing this steer committee of developers, designers, bigger stakeholders in the organization who have a particular vision for the organization, how it have to serve the patients or the customers, and bringing the end user's perspective. What does the patient want, or what does the end customer want from this service or the product? Will together build a common vision, and will also answer most of the challenges that we have. And that will answer three parts, Jaisal. That will answer what we are doing with this AI, why we are doing it, and how we have to do it. And this is very, very key for success, and to remove any biases that we have, and to contribute towards the final goal of the AI, whether to serve the patient or the customer better. Another important thing that we need to understand when it comes to AI is not evil. Like any tool, it needs guidance, it needs a process, it needs a vision. And for that, it needs a collaborative vision and skill set coming from different sets of people. And that's where steering committee comes into place, which have a common vision, not towards the product, but common vision towards the end user, what we are trying to provide them. And that's where the key of success will lie.
Thank you. Thank you, Hema. And I will move on to Ati. Ati, can you add your insights to this? And I will be moving around the table and asking everybody else as well. So yeah, Ati, over to you.
Thank you for that. I think what I've realized in the space where we talk about there needs to be steering committees, there needs to be a group of people that will review the code and the intention of the code. But I think what a comment that Ryan made was that data is a representation of the people, right? But what happens when the people on the table are so what's the word? There's a lack of diversity, right? In that there's nobody there to actually double check that they are actually being biased, because their ways of thinking are actually quite similar. So I think what I've learned is that the focus on diversity within an organization is starting to become more important than before, because if we don't have the right people in the room with the right kind of voices, right, to check each other, we could have all of the automation in terms of the audits, but if our audit teams are not as diverse, right, there could be an assumption that the data in of itself is a representation of the people. But if the people themselves are not a representation of the demographics of the people in whatever organization or community they operate in, then the bias will cease to reduce, because there's nobody checking on each other, because everybody is the same.
I think Ryan has raised his hand as well. So Ryan, over to you. This is an interesting topic, definitely for you.
So I'm going to tell you a funny story, and I don't mean to call the ICO out by doing it. We require in our GDPR certification a diversity policy, and they wrote, "Wait a minute, this isn't in GDPR." We said, "Yes, it is. This is technological and organizational controls." And it's exactly to Ati's point, which is that if you aren't requiring, and I want to get away from I hate the term superficial, but the physical ways in which we see diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of how you are raised is as important, if not more important. And so when you build a diversity policy, and that is being enforced by an empowered ethics committee. So now you get algorithmic risk committees, the group responsible for these systems, by name in this audit infrastructure, okay? Now you know that we've solved, or at least begun to solve, Ati's problem. In addition, we have that diversity policy playing out over the diverse input and multi-stakeholder feedback loop, that required human agency that is designed to assess the risk and impacts from the system. This isn't conversation anymore. This isn't maybe it'll happen. It'd be nice if it happened. Oh, we should do this. This is, if you didn't do it, you are not compliant with the audit. And you know what? Amazon got hit with an $887 million fine on GDPR. I guarantee you their attorneys said, we are compliant with GDPR. I guarantee you. And they thought they were. I don't think there was bad intent here. What our GDPR certification will change is embedding all of these organizational rules, all of these accountability structures into a system that now, if you want to be certified GDPR compliant, you will have to do. And that is a big difference from talking about it, thinking about it, and so on. Compliance asserted and assured by a third party that it's been done. Something the public, people, can count on and trust.
I think I really understand how independent auditors are so important for the systems. And Simon, over to you. Would you like to add some insights from you for this question, please?
Yeah, of course. So like Ryan you talked about, I guess, having, some strong, independent, reliable, like third party to audit. And I think just to like add to that, it's also important that we continually work towards educating everyone to basically make that team, to become those people who are able to do that. And so, at least from a developer's point of view, sharing work and development within fairness and bias, I think, is very important to help train these people or get people excited, about tackling some of these problems. That sort of communication in that community is really important, and I think, ironically, there will be some systematic biases that need to be fixed in order to get like it's a bit of a I don't know, like chicken and the egg problem. But so everyone just needs to always be tackling bits of this where they can, because improving detecting and managing bias in data is only going to help us to improve managing bias in data.
Thank you so much, Simon. Ian, your hand is up. Would you like to ask your question quickly?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. We are.
Okay, my question basically has to relate to a certain extent to the blockchain space, right? So in the blockchain space, the issue for payments was creating some type of consensus mechanism that could be relied upon in order to approve transactions. And so in order to approve artificial intelligence algorithms or data sets, for example, is it possible to create some type of automated third-party consensus mechanism that the community could agree upon what those indicators were, but it's an automated approval process as opposed to making this completely human. So we're just looking, is it possible to create some type of ground truth that you can automate, that could be exposed, all the information could be public. So just a thought, as we're working, some of these issues out ourselves.
So I would call upon Ryan to take the question, and then I'll move on to the other panelists as well.
Sure, I'll say quickly, a proper auditor serves as a proxy for the public. So it removes that need for fully public information. Now, we demand a large amount of actual public disclosures where we think the information for the public is required for good decision-making, informed decision-making on key elements of data privacy or trust and so on. So there are public disclosures that are required through the audit process, but the vast majority of this is held by the auditor acting as a proxy for society, and that's beneficial. It's been proven in the past, heavy regulatory oversight requiring complete transparency is innovation killing and stifling. Because now you have to expose trade secrets, you have to expose intellectual property, and it basically makes companies less interested in innovating in the space. So the concept of an independent auditor, a proxy who can be held under non-disclosure, but is held to a high standard of, I don't work for you, I work for the public, right? Acts to protect intellectual property, protect trade secrets, but also give that assurance that's required of the public. It's kind of a blend of a fully public versus, if you think of it as a spectrum, fully public, independent audit, heavy regulation with full transparency. It's kind of the meet in the middle solution.
Thanks, Ryan. Ian, would you like to hear from any other panelists?
Yes. I mean, I I just say that, to kind of respond to what he was saying, in the blockchain space, you have a ton of innovation that's being done. Also in the AI space, for example, Singularity Net is an example that I'm sure a lot of us know, and they're using blockchain technology, and all the information is public on the ledgers, and so people can't necessarily see what what exactly you're spending money on or where your resources are going. But it is a lot more transparent than any other system that I've seen, and I see a lot of systems going in that particular direction as far as being able to automate that accountability aspect of it. But yes, I do agree that there needs in the meantime there should probably be a human aspect as well.
Right.
Can I add to that at all?
Yeah. Yes, please.
I was just going to comment. I think it's using blockchain it's a really nice, neat idea for having some system or some process where the decision is decentralized. So by that sort of definition, provided everyone has the knowledge and the ability to take part in some sort of blockchain technology, then it's a really great idea. I think part of the issue that sort of blockchain is facing right now is that not everyone wants to take part. There's a huge entry to barrier. I've tried to read a lot about it. Even I don't know very much about it. And so Ryan sort of touched on having some third-party auditor or something like that. I feel like it's a similar thing that we have in a lot of governments. You elect someone to represent you. And so I feel like personally there's an easier way about this. Having some third party that you can trust to actually manage that, rather than putting it completely just in the hands of everyone. What can happen a lot with blockchain is that a small percentage of the population actually controls it.
I would also
easier then it's definitely something that becomes more of a possibility.
I would also just very quickly add, auditor doesn't have to be a human. We have a number of groups inside of For Humanity who are already building comprehensive system solutions to receive and accumulate and collate and identify key issues that have to achieve compliance. It can be highly systematized. However, there are elements of the audit criteria that demand human agency. And honestly, that's for the benefit of human. And I'll argue all day long about whether humans should have control of AI. The answer is yes. And I'll go to the maths on that one.
Absolutely.
Like
yes, Hema, please go ahead.
Jaisal, Ian, there's been a recent development where people are creating like blockchain kind of a concept for health records. Okay. And the main reason behind it is we are moving especially in the healthcare industry, from a technology-centric industry to what we call as a patient-centric industry. And in the next few years, what we will see is there will be no separate health tech, there will be no separate fintech. There will be only one industry, which is customer-centric industry. And all these partnerships and acquisitions and mergers that we are seeing, like big tech companies buying healthcare and fintech and all other companies, they are going to create a bubble around each customer. And customer profile is well known to those people than us. So blockchain might be a kind of a solution where the patient have the control and patient can decide where the healthcare records go. At the same time, it's very important to have that awareness in a two-way industry. One from the organization point of view and one from a customer point of view. We always talk about the organization should have these controls and so on, which is true, but also it is equally important that the customer, the end user, the patient who is using the AI tools or who is using the blockchain technology have to understand what are they dealing with, what is that doing, what is that service doing to me, and in return, what I'm giving it to them. We have a very famous saying here, what we say that if a tool is free, then you are the IP of the tool. okay? And which means that the data is the payment that you're giving in return. So when it comes to blockchain or any other technology, it's very important to understand from 3 points of view. What is my final intended use? What is its risk and what's its impact? Not just from the customer point of view, but also the organization point of view. And the third party vendors who play this role, especially in terms of information processing, data storage, data transmission, we always look at from a tool point of view, organization point of view, or from a patient point of view. We don't look at from an information cycle point of view. And it's extremely important for the tools like AI to look at from an information life cycle point of view, from the information entry to processing, to transmission, to storage. What are the roles people are playing? What are the access they have? What is the intended use, risk, and impact at each of the stage? And that is the best way to do it, because we are now in the 5th industrial revolution where AI, artificial intelligence, and ethical intelligence will work together in inclusion. And at the bottom line, for it to work, we have to have the data intelligence. And that's the better way to put it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Dean, would you like to add any insights to it?
Yes, I would love to add the words. And the thing is, like, AI is fundamental. We know Tabata is going to be here, and we have been working with it, and this is our future. And we need to understand, like, where are we right now? Which level are we? And ISP, and in my research, what I understand, we are in World War IV. So in World War IV, every time when there is a war or something, everything is very clouded. It's money-making market, and it's like very not understandable situations, and not understandable tech, and not understandable like organization and governments, how they are behaving and who they are saying, because the technologies nowadays we have, if I don't have smartphone, and it's not updated in a right way, or the program is not updated, I cannot use the ID. The Swedish ID system is like, I need to have that. So the people who's living in the street, they cannot have it. They cannot even have the bank accounts or anything like that. So there is a bias in us. Like, and thank you, Ryan, to make that sure, and to make that you confirmed it, that we cannot eliminate bias. This is like impossible to eliminate bias, and like we need to just work on it in some other way. And Hema was talking about, like, you want to see like what, why, and how, and I think so. It would be nice to understand, like, why are we doing this, and for whom, and are we doing it for humanity? Are we doing it for us, or is just a war business, or just about the money making business? And where are we right now, actually, and why? And after that, we can check it out. How are we going to do that? Who are we going to involve? Are we going to involve the people who doesn't understand that things? Are we going to educate them, or we're just going to left them behind, because those are the people, because they cannot just, they don't understand. We are making digital cities, we're making twin cities, we're making like cool stuff, and control. Those people are not important, you know. And organizations like that for humanity is inspiring me so much, because this is about humanity needs to connect with the humanity. And this war's benefits right now. And we have seen in war, like, it has been different. There we are not involved, we just get hurt all the time. But in this war, we can change things. We can understand humanity in totally different perspective. We are dealing with bias. We're talking about bias. And this is like a mind-blowing for me to understand, like, how humanity has been, and what we are talking about in a technology. No, we can do this and we can do that. But actually we are humans, and we have so long history, and eliminate things is not the right way. And like, we need to work together. We need to educate people, as Simon said too. We need to educate people, really everyone. And how we will do that? Who can afford it to be educated? You know, yeah. So all those things are very, very important when we think about the bias and humanity, AI, new technology, and World War IV. It's good to understand. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dean, for adding your insights. And Ati, you have raised your hand. Can you add your insights as well before I move to the next question?
No, I think I wanted to comment on Dean's question about who are we doing this for, right? I think when I look at the inherent bias that exists, it tends to be quite elitist in nature. So if you are a board member and you want an organization to increase your value of your investment, it's in the best interest of that organization to try and reduce, manage, or control the bias. Because if you look at the use cases that I was talking about, is that the misunderstanding of a potential target market could actually have an impact on the bottom line of the organization. Because as it is, there's a lot of people that are excluded because of the inherent bias that people have. So now I feel like there's almost like a business case for diversity more now than before, because organizations, there is no physical borders. Organizations are operating across different geographic locations. So it's in the best interest for whether board members, CEO, the top executives to actually understand the impact that bias can have in its bottom line. And the moment you increase or reduce your levels of biasness, it means that you're able to have a bigger target market for whatever product that you're doing, because you are not making ill-informed decisions on who to target or who not to target. So I think maybe that could be another angle that actually promotes the reduction of bias in our code, because it actually could have an impact on organizational bottom line.
Absolutely, Ati, I agree with you. Moving on to the next question, and I would start with Simon. There is a question from Mike I would like to ask. Do the panel think that there should be less regulation, but stiffer penalties or unified firm frameworks for compliance?
It's interesting. There's questions about what, are penalties some sort of regulation in some sense? I think that the most important thing is clarity on, I guess, what the impact of some bias is in any given situation, and clarity shared like amongst everyone, and it's sort of we promote education to the point that anyone can get the same clarity about what the impact of some decision is and how it affects them. I think that's the most important thing, and then the regulation or people can then decide whether or not regulation is something that is then needed. Looking at it from this point of view, I couldn't say whether or not regulation would be the right way to go about it, because I can't describe the whole problem. Whereas I can just help promote, I can at least help promote people to understand, the different types of bias, or provide, try to provide some place where people can share their ideas and learn together. I know it doesn't quite answer the question, but it's only because I don't think I could properly say.
Thanks, Simon, for adding it. I'll move on to Ryan to add some insight, and then Hema as well, and Ati.
Hema had her hand up first. I think you should let her go first.
Yes, hi, Hema. I think you should go first.
Yeah,
Sure. Hema, can you just go for it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think overall the idea is, what we have to understand is not any two products are the same. Not any organization is the same. Each organization is unique. Each industry is unique. And we will eventually go in the next few years where it would be integrated industries. So in terms of regulations and governance, it would be challenging if we say AI for healthcare, because now healthcare have IoT aspect of it, as Ryan said, cybersecurity aspect of it, healthcare especially have become a combination of PII and PHI information, which is identifiable information, personal health information together with the integrated technologies. As we move on and we have more and more technologies getting integrated in all these different fields, it becomes extremely challenging in terms of regulations if you bias it per industry. What we can bias it is on terms of GDPR is an amazing example, right? In terms of information, in terms of its risk, its impact towards the final end user. And then again, no AI tool is, we can't say all AI tools are high risk. We can't say all AI tools are low risk either. It depends upon what its risk and impact towards the consumer. So if we can design and develop the regulations and standards based on the information, its risk, its impact towards the final patient or the end user, we will have a much more smarter, sustainable, and measurable regulations and governance overall.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I move on to Ryan, will Ati, do you want to add anything? Okay, I can sense that Ati is saying a no. Moving on to Ryan to add your insights finally.
I had the privilege to address the APPGAI in late June, and they asked us what policy suggestions would you make? I have one: mandate independent audit of AI systems. Now, why? Do we want trust? Just broadly speaking, do we want trust in our systems? All systems, no matter how they impact us, systems that are put upon us where we're either the data subject in the input, or we receive the outputs, right? The answer is yes, we want an infrastructure of trust. I'm sorry, companies will not do it themselves. They will not. So that's why it's this simple concept of just make it normalized that everybody has to go through this audit. Now, is the audit the same for everybody? Not a chance. The audit is jurisdictionally sensitive. As much as we might want to talk about a global normalized norms and so on, laws are made country by country, culture by culture. That is not going to change anytime soon, okay? So the audit rules are built jurisdiction by jurisdiction, top down, board accountability, CEO accountability, chief data officer accountability across every AI autonomous system. That's normalized. Underneath that is an AI by AI by AI, autonomous system by autonomous system specific set of rules. And if that sounds like an enormous task, it is. That's why we need people in For Humanity to help, because we will build audit criteria for everyone in every jurisdiction around the world. And there's a lot of work to do, but we're doing it. We're starting to do it. We're engaging with regulators and governments around the world. So if you ask the question, what regulations should be in place, they're coming. The UK is doing fantastic work on GDPR, on children's code. The EU has got the Artificial Intelligence Act. It's got some silly parts to it. It's got some amazing parts to it, okay? The US has done so little. It's like the Wild West. It's garbage. People are not protected. You even look at the NIST framework. We are responding to the NIST AI risk framework. The whole framework does this. It takes a company and it looks in. How does the company protect itself? And I'll be honest with you, it made me want to vomit. So we're responding to the NIST AI risk framework, and the whole framework that they have in place looks in at companies. And I'm like, where the hell are the people in the equation? So our whole response is built around improving that, changing that perspective so that humans are in the equation, because they're not now. So if you ask the question, do we need laws? Do we need regulations? Absolutely. Do they need to be heavy and onerous? No, they need to be precise and specific, built around governance, oversight, accountability, focused on ethics, bias, privacy, trust, and cybersecurity.
Thanks, Ryan, for adding that insight. I would be probably asking Vibhav to add his insights before I move on to the next question. Vibhav, over to you.
Thank you. I'll just take a minute. That was an interesting question on regulation. I think it's a fantastic panel discussion. I just had a few impromptu thoughts. When you're looking at regulation and penalties, the question I think was that whether you need regulation and whether penalties work. penalties would work in a more deterrent sort of a scenario. I'm sort of just bringing in the legal aspect. We look at it in two. If you're looking at regulation and penalties, I think you have to look at it in two ways. One is before you come to the market, and the second part is when you're in the market. When you're before the market, certain thoughts, bias. What with the conversations on bias? What types of bias are there? Where does it come in? Who is not in the room? Who is thinking and responsible, who is thinking on and responsible for thinking on bias at the design stage? Is it fair for it to be the developer, or do we need someone else at the design stage? And how do you assess the bias at the design stage? The points I'm bringing all these points forward is just to highlight that when we're talking about penalties, laws, and regulation, there's a step before that. That is in terms of awareness, in terms of before it comes into the market while it's being developed, there is a certain level of understanding and awareness on which the legal framework will be built. So the legal framework could very well take care of these factors, which, as Brian's work for humanity on audit systems or any other compliance mechanism may take place. Once we have this in place, then the second part of the law would be conversation about if it's in the market, what kind of impact does it create? And what kind of impact should law be concerned about? Is it every single impact of artificial intelligence, AI, or is it some specific impacts? When we're talking about legal regulation in the context of bias, or in the context of, especially in the context of bias, we have to be clear which part and which aspect are we looking for regulation. If you're only thinking that pure penalties are going to work, not convinced, because penalty is connected to compliance. Compliance could, if without proper input and understanding, you could have a legal provision that really doesn't meet the expectation. That was only my limited point that I wanted to add to that question. Thank you.
Thanks, Vibhav. I think this is really important that before we go to the market and once we go to the market, how important it is to look at both the aspects, which people generally miss out. And moving on to the next question quickly, the question is from Neeraj, and he has asked, what would be your recommendations for organizations to have a measurable, actionable debiasing strategy? Should the approach contain a portfolio of technical, operational, organizational actions? Hema, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I can. So before even going to the actions to make the technology thing, you have to first understand on what basis you are doing it. So as Ryan said, so it is extremely important to understand what your organization stands for. What is vision and mission towards the end user, and how are you going to attain it in terms of whether it's data collection, transmission, using the tools to process the information and so on, and how much of AI plays a role in it. Another bigger challenge that we have right now is the heavy involvement of the third-party vendors because of the business partnerships and heavy integration that we do with the other platforms. So when you have the checklist, do consider and do create a framework based on the information that you handle, based on the information that you're processing or transmitting or doing analytics or taking decision making on behalf of the customer. It can be an medical image analysis that can help in terms of cancer. It can be a diagnostic thing. It can be just a good to have lifestyle kind of an app. So if you can't really understand the information, the vision towards the final customer, the risk and impact it's going to have, and then based on that, create high, medium, and low priorities, and then create the technical controls and operational controls, rather than just going blindly for organization. The major problem where most of the organizations lose their operational cost and time is not having a proper priority in terms of what we have. We have inventory systems, but do we actually have an asset management and inventory system based on the information that we handle and have that high, medium, and low risk inventories, rather than just having a team-based or a department-based systems where it takes 20 to 30% of more operational cost and time to maintain. So it all breaks down to that center data intelligence or information intelligence. And based on that, able to create a smart and strategic technology and operational controls. And that's where the key value comes into place and effectiveness of your efforts comes into place.
Absolutely. I think it is important to have the data intelligence. And as you said, metadata is the key in many areas, and many inventories also need to be maintained. Ati, would you like to add anything to this question from the panel?
No, I actually don't. And I just realized that I actually need to go. And I know there's 15 minutes left in the session. So is it possible if I can drop off now?
Absolutely. Please feel comfortable if you need to move on. It's a great pleasure to have you, and your talk was so insightful. Yeah, and the audience can connect to you on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Ati, Richard, would you like to add anything for Ati?
Just before you go, yeah, just thank you from me as well. And of course you can go. I didn't actually see that you got a note to leave early, but on this occasion it's okay.
Yeah, it's 15 minutes earlier. I just forgot about it. But I do apologize for having to jump off.
Please don't apologize. Thank you so much for the time you spent with us.
All right, cool. No problem.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks so much. There's a comment that has come in from the audience, and I think we also want to hear from their views what can happen. So Michelle has said, I'm interested to know if anyone here has worked in tech with an actually diverse data on product team. I genuinely haven't ever seen one or been part of one. That's my biggest concern for future of AI in private consumer tech. So first I'll go on with the panel and then ask the audience if anybody would like to get involved to answer this. So Simon or Hema, to start with. Simon, have you ever come across where you have given the examples to start with, but would you like to add some insights?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very passionate about this. I think a point was made earlier about how a lot of digital products that are now made, they serve the globe, and there's often a very big disconnect between the hiring pool and people working on something, and in terms of the population that then actually receive the effects of whatever the product is. In all my experiences, I've never had too international a team. You can have one country, two countries, people from 3 or 4 different places. It's still never, I guess, representative. You're all in the same role. You're not necessarily consuming the product. I think one solution to this is really moving towards open sourcing, as much software as possible. And that's what we're doing with this Fairlens code repository. Having some software to really look into how can you showcase and at least detect different biases within your data. I would love for if anyone wants to suggest ways of assessing or measuring bias and fairness within data. There needs to be a place for people to collaborate on that. And so that's why we created Fairlens as some place where hopefully anyone can get access to start tackling this problem.
Absolutely. I think open source code or inventories are really important that we need to look at from this perspective. Ryan, would you like to add any other insights to this?
Absolutely. First off, for those of you who know me and how I work on Zoom, I've seen the chat and I've been desperate to dive into the chat, but I can't dive into the chat and stay focused up here, and it's killing me because it's a great chat. So let me just say that first. When it comes to diverse inputs in the design and development phase, I'm actually going to make an argument that I wish I didn't have to make, but I think it's true. It's impossible. It's impossible at the starting point. And I'm going to tell you an example from For Humanity's experience. The original theory of For Humanity crafting audit rules was that I would curate a dialogue. we'd get experts in the room and the experts would write the rules. And we started this with digital contact tracing 15 months ago. For Humanity was one person, me, and we got a bunch of people in the room to write digital contact tracing rules as COVID was, kind of blowing up. And we got in the room and crickets. 10 days in, 5 audit rules. So I'll get back to you in 2030 when it's done. But it's not going to happen. So what that shows you is that having diverse inputs actually might be a hindrance to start. But please hear me when I say diverse inputs and multi-stakeholder feedback is crucial to an end product. So then the question is, how do you work it in? And I loved Simon's answer. It's the right answer. He uses the term open source. I'm going to use a slightly different term, used differently, which is crowdsourcing. So what happened in this process was a few of the people in the crowd came back to me and they said, this isn't working. And I laughed. I'm like, yeah, I see it. What do you want to do? And they were like, you write the rules. And I was really taken aback by that because I had this concept of diverse inputs in my head. But they said, look, you got it wrong. You could write perfect rules, the right rules, and it doesn't matter unless others come in, endorse, review, test, oversee, apply, make law, regulate, whatever, okay? They said, get us started, just get us going. I said, fine. I stepped away. 5 days later, I gave the group 238 audit rules for digital contact tracing because they were right. I did have a path. I had some idea. But here's the thing. Even if those were perfect, it doesn't matter until that crowd pours over it. And that's when you have to have diverse inputs, multi-stakeholder feedback, open source, crowdsource, whatever terminology we want to use. That's where we need to have this broad oversight and still review process. Because when I put those 238 rules out, it was maybe a 70 or 80% effort. Because now you've enabled many, many, many people to go line by line, word by word, definition by definition, find the problems, find the misses, find the mistakes that a middle-aged white dude made when he drafted some ideas. There's nothing wrong with me being a middle-aged white dude, nothing, okay? But I may not have sufficient perspective to put down the right set of governance. And so you need to put it out to other people who have different lived experience, different ways of thinking, different approaches, different backgrounds, and make sure they feel included and are included and have that robust voice. So Simon, it's exactly right. Jaisal said it too, right? More open sourcing, more crowdsourcing, but along the lines of at least at the review level. Let's not get too hung up at the design level, at the day one level, because unfortunately that's just not how things happen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That makes so much sense to have a process that is led by a team that have a goal and it doesn't get too chaotic. But the focus of that team being trying to stay as open as possible. Trying to keep the engagement, always making sure that that's sort of being invited, so that it can be steered by the crowd essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think crowdsourcing is the key to bring in diversity into the data and the auditing system both. I have a suggestion that, Richard, would you like to add any of your insights to this one? Definitely.
Yeah, I would like to add a quick word to that, and it is an agreement actually, but I think to answer that question, you could look around your AI team and see different ages, backgrounds, gender, skin color, and think, okay, great, so this looks like diversity and inclusion. It does look like diversity and inclusion, but then if that's in a company, to reinforce the point here about crowdsourcing, think about what they have in common. They've all been hired through the same process. They've got the same incentives for promotion and further compensation. They are operating in the same culture, and they have to fit into that. That's a form of compliance. That's why these people even start to dress the same, walk the same, talk the same. So if you're in that company, you're paid to fit in, right? So that's what you've got to look out. You've got to look beyond that. You've got to get to the open innovation. You've got to get to crowdsourcing. It's what we're about. It's what Ryan's about, many others. It's where the magic is. That's what I'll say about that.
I think it's a really exciting point and something that maybe sort of been brought upon having to work more remotely in the past sort of 2 or 3 years, and that's development products for developing open source, software and solutions really improved, and it's, it's getting easier and easier to, start working on something with 3 other people who you've never met before. You don't even speak the same language as them, but you all speak the same code language, and you like that idea is just really exciting, I think.
Just want to give you some of the updates on the recent collaboration efforts, as Simon said, that we have seen and that I'm fortunate to be part of. Is there is a data collaboration alliance that is formed between United States and Canada, which have a very diverse set of people from multiple industry sectors, from multiple privacy, cybersecurity, all those aspects. And we are creating a course, projects around data breaches, a lot of other, as you said, Simon, open source projects, a lot of other collaborated, creating the training materials and education modules for more people around the globe to learn. So it has become until we have a common vision, we can definitely go through some people initiating it, as Ryan said, and there will be more people putting in their peer review or their inputs towards it. But also there is a common language around diversity I would like to add, and this is kind of a little bit different input, and it will get implemented, and it makes sense for no matter how big or small your organization is, whether it's government, non-government, or an alliance or so on. So diversity should not be defined by race, ethnicity, and everything in an organization, but it should be defined by their expertise, their experience, their knowledge that they're bringing together, in which we will be a missing piece in that whole big puzzle. And the diverse thinking, expertise, skills, all those puzzle pieces of people coming differently from those different expertise, skills, background will make the puzzle pieces together and create a beautiful tapestry or a painting with a bigger vision. And that's how I see the diversity as.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hema, for adding that. And I would move on to my last question to summarize this. We did discuss on our last LinkedIn Live event, and I would like to take it in continuity to that, that data is very expensive, and hence people are moving towards synthetic data. But ideally, to solve real life problems, you need the real data from people, the diverse data itself. So do we think really that if people were to sell their personal data, which become the data sets, would that mitigate the bias? Because Hema, you rightly highlighted, sometimes data becomes very old and it's outdated. So in order to solve this and to keep the data relevant, would this be a solution as well? I'm saying one of the solutions. So Hema, what do you think on that?
So let's mainly go from big data to smart data and then to synthetic data. Okay, the bigger challenge that we have. There are 2 big challenges that we have right now. One is we always look it from a tool and technology point of view and say that the technology is the final cure, which is partially true, but not completely true. Because if you can't understand where are you going, why are you developing the technology and what it's used, you will now have, at present, the problem is we have all these humongous millions of tools and platforms, and all of them are siloed, right? They are not providing a complete solution. They're providing parts of the solution. And most of the tools are pretty much similar. It's the same with the data. We are talking about big data management tools and softwares and platforms. But why in the first hand are we collecting the big data? Why? What is the reason how we are collecting? If we don't have a vision of the data that we are collecting and the reason why we are collecting, it's a loss of operational cost and time for organizations. So first we have to have a vision. What kind of information are we handling? Why we need the data and what it would be used for. Similar for the synthetic data. We have to create a requirement around the synthetic data. What are the data sets that we need? What it would be used for, how it would be used for, and did we actually consider, for example, if it's a cancer drug clinical trial that we want to use for with the synthetic data. The history of the data is not always determines the future of the data when it comes to AI, because things are changing so fast. So it's a real-time data, mimicking the real-time data, and the synthetic data also have to be regularly evolutionized based on the changes that's happening in the real-time data, and considering all those factors of geographical, demographics, race, ethnicity, and the synthetic data have to kind of mimic the real-time data, considering all the changes that's happening around the community. And that's where the synthetic data might bring in the value. When you're saying selling the data, now again, we see in healthcare, especially the patient wants to take the control of their information, not the providers, not the patients. And that's the reason why we see a rise of health platforms where patients can bring in the data from all different medical devices, all different digital apps, and they will be in control of the data, and they are ultimately accountable for the data. So if that goes on, then the synthetic data process will also be driven by the patient. But again, the real-time mimic, what it would be used for, and based on that, creating the requirement around the synthetic data, and how it's going to change or when it needs to be changed, and its continuous monitoring is very important.
Thanks, Hema, for adding the insights. I think I'm being conscious of time. I cannot take any other questions or panelists. Thanks, Ryan and Simon as well, to add all your insights. I would just summarize quickly. It is so important to have diversity and inclusivity. Along with that, to have the information cycle, the data intelligence, the way we are doing the benchmarking is so important. Along with that, having a third-party independent human in the loop as an auditor is important, who becomes like a representative for the people itself, and inherent bias needs to be removed, and industry-wise context has to be added so that that data becomes very much relevant. I think we have looked at types of biases, how to mitigate them, what kind of societal impact it is having onto us, and it is now important that across the world, if organizations work together, this can be mitigated, and AI can bring in more success rather than the fear that people have. Richard, over to you.